The hero of this story always dreamed essentially from behind the shadow, and when he is reborn in a new world, he finally succeeds. Without anyone noticing, he becomes the Shadow, the secret leader of an organization called Shadow Garden, a force beyond the living that is about to change the fate of the entire world. And if you want to change your own fate, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much to everyone for the support, and let's move on to this video. Right at the beginning, we see a girl named Akane, who is a high school student. She is awakened by the alarm clock, and it seems she passed out after a horrible night. Clearly, she is not very excited to deal with the background characters in her school. In the shower, she cries while thinking about going to school. She opens the door of her house, and at that moment, a bad memory invades her mind. She wakes from this trance when the driver calls her. Akane enters the car and heads to school. Upon arriving, several students pay attention to her, showing us that she is extremely popular. Akane approaches a boy she has been sitting next to for the past months, and she greets him, but becomes irritated when Sid gets her name wrong once again. This makes her feel that she is not as important as she thinks, and without wasting time, she corrects Sid with a forced smile. He tries to repeat the correct name again, but he ends up getting it wrong. Sid invents a silly excuse to justify the confusion, saying he fell down the stairs when he was a child, and that made him have difficulty with names. And this excuse is very good, and I will start using it too. But that only worsened poor Akane's mood. She does not know what to feel regarding Sid. They had been side by side for months, and he had never looked directly at her, not even once. Trying to end this subject, Akane changes the topic of the conversation, and Sid apologizes for failing, but he continues getting her name wrong. Later, some students approach Akane and become excited when they learn that she will play the lead role in the school's evening performance. Everyone praises her, since the role would demand even more dedication than last year. Akane admits she is very nervous, but also excited. After that, she goes to the bathroom, and there she remembers the sequence of events that made her abandon her artistic career in elementary school. Meanwhile, Sid spends his time reading a book, and during his reading, he murmurs something about acquiring more power. The boy is thinking he is Virgil from Devil May Cry. But anyway, near the end of the class, the teacher asks for a volunteer to total the answers from the school festival survey. Akane volunteers, but she is rejected quickly because of her tight schedule and the tutoring classes she would have that day. The teacher then looks at Sid and asks if he could do the work, and he accepts without hesitation. Akane is known for being the teacher's favorite, and also very popular among the students. She does this to avoid hostility, since she believed that by being loved by everyone, the chances of being targeted would decrease greatly. At least that was what she thought, and later at night, Sid plays the piano alone at the school, delivering that impressive sonata. Meanwhile, on the street, some criminals ambush Akane's driver. They end up beating the man until he is left broken, and after several failed attempts to contact him, Akane decides to walk home alone. During the walk, she enters an alley that seems far too quiet, and suddenly, she feels she is being watched, which leaves her even more frightened. In panic, she tries to find a way to escape that terrifying situation. While she searches for a route of escape, the same two criminals who attacked her driver surprise her. One of them restrains her with a chokehold and tries to cover her mouth, to leave her unconscious before taking her to the hideout. Meanwhile, Sid had been following the criminals silently, observing every step, only waiting for the right moment to act. When Akane awakens, she realizes she is tied up and becomes terrified. She tries to scream, but one of the kidnappers, who is a former soldier, tells her to stay quiet or she will become a statistic. He makes it clear that she made a mistake by walking alone through the city at night, especially considering her father's influence. The former soldier states that the ransom request has already been sent, and the other criminal is more interested in Akane's body than in the money, since he would never be able to touch a woman if it were not through kidnapping. He approaches her, reminding her of the previous kidnapping, the one in which she was targeted by a violent stalker. Akane tries to fight the criminals, but she has no chance against them. The man says he intends to bring back the memories of when horrible things happened to her. At that moment, Sid, who had been observing everything from outside, put on a mask, grabbed a crowbar, and broke into the hideout. Sid responds, saying that his name is Stylish Roofing Slayer, and that is an extremely strange name. It would have been better if he had simply called himself Batman. And without wasting time, and to our happiness, Sid kills that miserable criminal who was trying to assault Akane. Now, only he and the former soldier remain. After a brief exchange of taunts, Sid accepts the challenge, even knowing he was facing a trained soldier. He begins by using his crowbar as if it were a training staff, but he changes his style when he notices it was not working. Now he starts to use it the same way he did when facing biker gang, with raw strength and direct strikes. Hearing this, the former soldier realizes that Sid is not only a stylish killer, he is the legendary crowbar monster, and that nickname is far better than the other one. Sid finally manages to land a direct hit on the former soldier, and keeps striking until the man becomes completely motionless. Then, he grabs a knife and cuts the ropes that tied Akane. Before leaving, he gives her a piece of advice so she will be more careful when returning home alone. He was not satisfied with his own performance, and if fighting a simple soldier was already difficult, he imagines what it would be like to face a group of armed single mothers. A fight like that would certainly be complicated. After that, Sid disappears, and Akane calls the police. The situation could have been much worse and even reached the media, destroying Akane's career once again. But thanks to her father's connections, the case is silenced and nothing becomes public. In the end, Akane does not discover who this stylish killer is, or the crowbar monster, call him whatever you want. She never imagined that this masked vigilante was the same boy who had been trying to avoid her at all costs. The next morning, Akane goes to school full of joy, and in the locker room, she encounters Sid once again. This time he greets her correctly, and for the first time Akane sees Sid look directly into her eyes. Later, a news report announces an accident that had happened on a city road involving Sid, who was run over by the Ike's truck. And here our entire expectation is shattered, since it did not last long and the boy has already died. He had died on the scene, and the police stated that the driver was not watching the road at the moment of the impact, and an investigation would be opened to clarify what really happened. Then, the story shows Sid when he was still a child. From a young age, he had this obsession with becoming a superhero like Batman. He did not even know exactly where this had come from. He only knew that he wanted deeply to be a hero at any cost. Different from the passing dream every child has, his dream acted like a constant flame, a flame that never went out and pushed him forward. Sid trained with everything he could. He tried to master any skill that could make him stronger. At school, he was an ordinary boy, completely harmless. But when he put on his mask, he became something entirely different. While others grew up and abandoned this phase of wanting to be superheroes, Sid moved in the opposite direction, becoming more and more determined. He kept training, believing that one day he would achieve his dream. But the moment arrived when he had to accept the reality that he would never be able to become a Super Saiyan. In the real world, martial arts were the limit, and even if he mastered all of them, he would still have a gun pointed at his head if he ever fought armed soldiers. In that scenario, he did not have much to do besides giving up. Unless he became the strongest martial artist in the world, maybe then he could face an entire army alone. But there was still a problem. If a nuclear bomb hit him, he would be vaporized, so there would not be much he could do. So his greatest dream was to become so powerful that not even a nuclear bomb could destroy him. And since the impossible does not exist for Sid, he moves toward this objective. He accepted nothing less than absolute power. Now, in another reality, we see him using his powers as the Eminence in Shadow, surrounded by his group. They talk about a threat they had just cornered in the city. The target had nowhere else to run, so Sid confirms that everything occurred exactly as he predicted. His subordinates praise his insight and the care with which he had planned everything. They were about to celebrate their first important hunt in a long time, and Sid, on the other hand, is satisfied with the team's work, even without exactly understanding what they are doing that is so important. But deep down, he is happy. After dying in his first life, Sid earned a second chance. And in this new world, he was living his childhood dream of becoming a hero. But he was not the usual hero, since he had magic added to the abilities he had already mastered. Even so, he was still not satisfied. With magic and combat, he was on the path to becoming one of the most powerful beings in that world. Sid then tells his group that there is a peak and everyone must reach that apex, and that they must run to get there. This time, he is determined to reach that peak no matter the cost. He thinks to himself that he would give everything, absolutely everything, to achieve his goal. Sid never wanted to be the main hero or the final villain. What he wants to be is the shadow, the one who acts behind everything and reveals his own greatness within the darkness. He confesses this to the young Alpha. She responds by saying that everything he said made sense. She found some ancient texts describing something that seemed to be the cult of Diablos. Sid confirms that this matches his suspicions, and Alpha continues saying that the more they research and learn, the more they discover how powerful the cult is. Before she finishes, Sid completes her sentence. They hide in the shadows, and we hunt the shadows. That was what he truly wanted to become, the eminence in the shadows. However, he jokes by saying that Alpha is a little slow to keep up with his reasoning. The scene shifts to the police finding the body of a boy. The owner of that body was Sid himself, who, in the last summer of high school, gave up trying to become strong in a world without magic and threw himself in front of a vehicle. He ended up being reborn as a baby, the son of a wealthy couple. The father celebrates, saying that his oldest daughter, Claire, always wanted a little brother and would be very happy with the arrival of the little one. The mother comments that something is strange, the baby is not crying, but then he finally cries, and she concludes she was just imagining things. Now reborn, Sid thinks he had no idea how or why he ended up there, but that does not matter. What matters is that the air is filled with magical energy, something that in his previous life existed only in dreams and fairy tales. Now he can claim this overwhelming power for himself, and that is all that matters. He was reborn as the son of Baron Kagino, an aristocrat who lives in the countryside. For generations, that family had produced warriors who reinforced their bodies with magic. Everyone had great expectations for a genius of the family, but that genius was not him. It was his older sister. Sid grows in the shadow of his talented sister, living the life of an ordinary knight, trying to stay hidden as much as possible from society. Later, we see him facing some bandits, using magic after politely asking them to return what they stole. They refused, and in their fight he defeats them. He then collects what they had taken, and while examining the place, he sees a cage. He approaches, thinking it is a slave, but he finds a strange lump of flesh that is still alive. This indicates that the person was possessed. He senses that same magical frequency and realizes what is happening. It is a mana overflow. Sid decides to use that body as an experiment, since it was not his and he would not be at risk. He starts injecting magic and testing things, trying different methods, an entire month of exciting experiments that led nowhere, until he finally understands how to contain the magical collapse. To his surprise, the body returns to normal, revealing a young woman. He is impressed that that strange lump of flesh returned to normal. Without knowing what to do, he decides to perform his first act as the eminence in the shadows. The girl awakens, frightened to still be alive, and Sid, now playing his role, says that he broke the curse that consumed her, setting her free. She asks what curse he is talking about, and he explains that a terrible spell was cast upon her and upon all the descendants of the ancient heroes. He shows a book containing a tale of sacred scriptures, the story of the 3 heroes who defeated the demon Diablos and saved the world. He says that this story is true, and in his last breath, Diablos cast a curse that turned the descendants of the heroes into possessed creatures, but someone distorted the story, turning the descendants of the heroes into targets of contempt. He decides not to reveal who is responsible, claiming that it is too early and that doing so would put her life in great danger. But the young woman insists, saying she does not care about the risk. Sid then reveals that her enemy is the cult of Diablos, a fanatic group that plans to revive the great demon. They never appear under the light of day, and his mission is to act in the shadows and stop the evil plans of the cult of Diablos. He formally introduces himself as Shadow, the one who stalks in the shadows to hunt the shadows. And after this incredible monologue, he explains that his path will not be easy, and that he still needs to complete his missions. Then he asks the young woman if she is prepared to walk at his side. The girl says she lost everything, but since he saved her, she will follow whatever he desires. She will walk with him and punish the guilty, and accepts this willingly, naming their organization Shadow Garden and giving herself the name Alpha. And after inventing this entire story and performing his first improvised act with mastery, 3 years passed. He is now 13 years old as a knight in training. He continues being only an ordinary boy. The crimes and the combat of this world are quite simple, and since he came from a life in the age of information, he was able to merge several martial arts and optimize them, creating a very unique style. We see him fighting against his sister, Claire, but she defeats Sid easily, believing that he has not improved at all. A maid calls Claire, saying that her mother is calling her, and that the guests for her farewell party have arrived. Claire says goodbye to him and asks the maid to clean him up. Sid believes that he needs to act as a background character if he wants to be prepared for the great day he knows will come. At 15, all nobles must attend the Midgar Academy for knights in the royal capital. But on the day of Claire's departure, she goes out to buy cigarettes and disappears, just like many people's fathers. Since Alpha had already gathered other members for Shadow Garden, the group begins the search for Claire. They discover that she was kidnapped by the cult of Diablos, captured by a high-ranking officer since she is a descendant of one of the heroes. Using a map, they depart that same night to rescue her, and Claire was chained somewhere. The group ends up attacking and defeating the kidnapper, but he managed to escape by very little, forcing them to split up. Sid ends up finding the man alone, and he humiliates him greatly before defeating him. But before dying, the kidnapper warns that the darkness of the world is far deeper than they imagine. Sid sees a pendant belonging to the man's daughter and takes it, ending his mission. The next day, Claire returns to Malmer Manor, pretending that nothing happened, and then finally leaves for the Royal Academy. Sid would have liked to go with her at that moment, but he still needs to put the girls to work, so he says goodbye to them. Later, Sid is on a train, thinking about what Alpha and the others said about the cult being a large organization, operating on a global scale. He finds it impressive. After all, they had to spread across the world to fight it. However, Sid believes they may have misinterpreted things, and that perhaps the cult does not even exist in the enormous way they imagine. Even so, he does not blame them. He himself would have drawn such conclusions when he was younger. Remembering this, he smiles. Then he says he will continue fighting to become the eminence in the shadows, even if he ends up being the last man in the world to follow that path. Later, Sid arrives in the capital of the Kingdom of Midgar, and he looks at a tall and majestic building. Remembering when he was enrolled in the same school as his sister, the Midgar Knight Academy, he recalls that the school was intended for the most promising students, both from the kingdom and from outside it. Even so, he does not understand how he was accepted, since he considered himself only a secondary character. After waking up and arriving at the academy, he saw his two best friends, Skew and Poe, waiting for him. They noticed that his hair looked different from the last time, but they did not spend time on that subject because they needed to run to catch the train. After running a bit, they managed to board, but the car was already almost completely full. On the train, Sid comments that he would like to live in the dormitory, like the elite student. His friends smile, saying that it is almost impossible, since the dormitories are only for royalty and high-ranking nobles, not for people like them. Sid, however, believes there is a path for them to become honor students, like Claire did, and earn a spot there. To accomplish this, they need to win the Bushin Festival. His friends think this idea is even more absurd. Shortly after, Sid remembers the bet he had made with them. Apparently, they had agreed that whoever got the worst grade on the exam would have to confess his love to the most desired girl in the school and be brutally rejected by her. Nothing will remain of the fool who does that. For Sid, this is a very important event, since he never had the courage to expose himself like this in his previous life. But now he is in a completely different world, studying at an academy that does not even care. When they arrive at the school, they spot the girl from the bet, Princess Alexia. A student is kneeling in front of her, offering flowers in front of several other students. He speaks like a true noble, elegant and confident, but Alexia rejects him immediately. Seeing this, Sid's friends say he cannot back out now. They are determined to make him fulfill his bet. Sid, on the other hand, is optimistic. He just wants to finish quickly, since he is absolutely certain that Alexia will reject him at once. Later, he finds her in the forest while his friends watch him from hiding. Then Sid delivers the worst, most embarrassing, and most awkward love confession in history, stuttering and looking as if he is about to faint. After he finishes his confession, he only waits for the rejection, because he did everything in the most humiliating way possible. But to his surprise, Alexia ends up accepting. She says she had been waiting for someone like him, and so Sid and his friends are left in complete shock, unable to believe what they just witnessed. The news that Sid is dating Princess Alexia spreads through the entire school, and in the cafeteria everyone looks at him in a very strange way, trying to understand how someone like him managed something so impossible. Many believe it must have been some misunderstanding. Sid, however, is not comfortable with this at all, since he wanted to use the princess for fun. But in the end, it was she who began using him as an object. Sitting with his friends, they insist that he is not worthy of dating Alexia, but Sid believes she must have some hidden motive for accepting him. His friend, however, tell him to enjoy it, since she is the most desired girl in the school. At that moment, Alexia appears and sits at the table with them, confirming the rumors even more. She receives a different meal, with enormous portions, and Sid's friends wonder how she will eat all of that. Alexia replies that she never finishes everything and that she would not mind sharing with lower class students. Hearing this, Sid begins his operation "Break Up With Me Now." He sticks his chopsticks into her food and takes a piece, something unthinkable for a noble. But instead of ending the relationship, she invites him to take sword lessons with her. Even though Sid says he already trained in the lower division, she explains that she secured a spot for him in session 1. This session is reserved for high-ranking nobles. And on the first day of class, instructor Zenon explains how the training works. Students are paired so he can evaluate strikes and counterstrikes, and, of course, Sid ends up being placed to fight against his own girlfriend, exactly as she wanted. During the match, Sid notices that she is not actually that good. Her style is very basic, rigid, and not creative, far inferior to her sister Claire, who is famous as the strongest knight in the kingdom. Even so, he recognizes Alexia's efforts as she slowly advances by improving her fundamentals. After the fight, Alexia thanks him and praises his fighting style, but says she hates it because it resembles hers too much. Sid has no time to think about this, because he sees Zenon approaching to confront Alexia about choosing him as her boyfriend. Zenon accuses her of acting like a child trying to run away from responsibility, especially because she had been promised to him through an arranged marriage. Later, Sid questions Alexia about not wanting to marry Zenon and using him for this, as a simple tool to escape that engagement. Alexia indirectly confirms it by dismissing his words, saying that he is not innocent either, since he only approached her because he lost a bet. She reveals she discovered this through his friends, then threatens to report everything to the student council and turn his life at the academy into real hell. She insists that Sid keep pretending to be her boyfriend, at least until Zenon stops chasing her. Sid highly doubts that will happen anytime soon, but Alexia seems to have a plan. After a lot of insistence, Sid remains firm and says no, until she takes out a gold coin and tosses it to him. At first, Sid tries to maintain a cold and distant posture, asking if she really believes he can be bought so easily. The answer, however, is yes, because he grabs the coin off the ground in less than a second. She begins throwing several coins at him and calls him her loyal little dog. And since Sid is a very clever guy, he accepts without question, and during their staged boyfriend and girlfriend act, Alexia sees Zenon talking to two girls. That irritates her deeply, and she quickens her pace to walk past him. Zenon, in turn, only smirks, satisfied for having provoked her. After class, Sid and Alexia take the train, and Sid is exhausted from hearing Alexia complain about Zenon, and concludes that although she is extremely polite in public, inside she is filled with resentment and insults. They stop to get ice cream, and Sid wonders why she does not cut the line since she is a princess. She replies that she wants everyone to know about their relationship. While they eat their ice cream, Sid finally asks why she refuses to marry someone perfect like Zenon. Alexia answers that she hates everything about him. He may look perfect on the outside, but that only reminds her of the mask she is forced to wear. Inside, he is certainly filled with flaws. She just does not know which ones yet. She states she has nothing specifically against Sid because he is full of imperfections, unlike Zenon. On the way home, she comments once again about Sid's sword style, which is mysterious and unique, and says she still despises him because of it. Sid then criticizes her technique, saying she is putting too much strength into her strikes. She defends herself, explaining that she always wanted to reach her sister's level and that she trained alone from zero trying to catch up. Even so, she is constantly compared to Claire, being called an ordinary swordswoman. Sid understands one reason. His style is very similar to hers, but he does not care about that. Instead, he praises Alexia's dedication. Immediately, she draws her sword and points it at him, and Sid does not even move. She demands to know what he meant with that compliment, and Sid explains that it does not mean anything special, and that he only gets annoyed when people speak badly about the things he likes. And in this case, he likes the way she fights. Moments later, the train arrives at their stop, and Alexia says goodbye and leaves, and with that, Sid believes their forced relationship has finally ended. The next day, he arrives at school with his friends, who apologize for revealing the bet to Alexia. He forgives them, but then they notice several knights from the Order of the Knight at the school entrance. The knights approach and inform Sid about the sudden disappearance of the princess, and since he was the last person seen with her, he is now the main suspect. Sid realizes the size of the trouble he is in, and meanwhile, Alexia wakes up in an unknown place. She realizes the horror of the situation when she sees she is restrained by magical chain. The room is strange, dark, and she has no idea where she is. For a moment, she even considers the absurd possibility that Sid could have been responsible. Scanning the area with her eyes, she finds a monstrous one-eyed creature, also chained, clearly subjected to experiments and brutal torture. Soon after, a strange man wearing a lab coat enters the room with a manic smile, celebrating the fact that he finally obtained royal blood. Alexia stays calm while he completely ignores her presence, continuing to monologue about royal blood. When she manages to get his attention, she asks what the purpose of all that is. He answers that her blood can be used to resurrect demons in the current era. Alexia does not fully understand what he means, but she mocks him by saying she became wet just from hearing that. Meanwhile, the Order of the Night is torturing Sid, believing he kidnapped Alexia. They interrogate him, obtaining no answers at all. They become extremely irritated, deciding to increase the intensity of the torture. They use long claw-like needles and pierce his thigh. Sid screams in despair, begging for his life, swearing he does not know where she is. They believe he is finally telling the truth, but they do not know he is merely acting. He waited his entire life to be tortured while pretending to be a random NPC, and now another one of his dreams has come true. This guy is completely unhinged. Back in the hideout, Alexia believes her sister must already be searching for her. However, she is quite surprised that the search is taking so long. Despite the chaos, the sinister doctor continues extracting Alexia's blood, and with each syringe his enthusiasm grows in a grotesque way. Desperate, Alexia begs him not to take so much blood, saying she is not ready to die. The doctor, however, assures her he will not let her die, because he still wants much more blood. When he tries to collect more once again, the needle cannot pierce her skin, and this infuriates him. In crisis, he screams that he is frustrated for being unable to progress in his research. Taking out his anger, he begins stomping on the head of the monstrous creature chained beside Alexia. She tries once again to distract him, mentioning the blood extraction, trying to make him stop. This leads him to grab a bowl of rice and attempt to force Alexia to eat, pushing the food against her mouth while she resists. According to him, this would increase her blood volume, although Alexia is certain that none of this is for her benefit. The strange creature beside her watches everything in silent awareness. Meanwhile, Zenon goes to Princess Iris, Alexia's sister. Iris praises him for his cooperation, and Zenon, however, claims to feel partially responsible for what happened, since the princess disappeared inside the school grounds. Both agree that rescuing Alexia must be the highest priority, and despite the report she received, Iris believes that Sid is responsible for her sister's disappearance. But Zenon argues that Sid would never be capable of defeating someone on Alexia's level, much less capturing her. Iris comments that Sid remained in absolute silence during the 5 days he was imprisoned. She thinks he should be released, but watched closely. Zenon agrees and insists that Sid had nothing to do with the kidnapping. Yet Iris remains disturbed. She hates the idea that students from her sister's academy could be involved in something so serious. In addition, she laments that there is so little help available to search for her sister. Zenon tries to comfort her, saying she should not carry the burden alone, and then asks how he can help. Iris asks him to maintain order inside the academy while she continues the search. Meanwhile, Claire, Sid's sister, is furious that he has been detained for so many days. She demands his release and requests permission to look for him, but she is completely ignored. At the same moment, Iris is overwhelmed by memories of her missing sister. She recalls the rare moments they spent together, almost all of them dueling with swords. It had been a very long time since their last real conversation, and Iris fears she may never have the chance to talk again. A few days later, Sid is finally released and takes a train back home. Still injured, he decides not to treat his wounds, since a background character must endure his hardships. But he soon notices he is being followed. When he gets off the train, the men continue after him, and a woman quickly passes by him and whispers for him to meet her later. When he arrives in his room that night, Sid finds Alpha waiting for him. He is surprised, since he expected Beta, who should be fulfilling her assistant duties. She then updates him on the investigation regarding the cult of Diablos. She assures him that Shadow Garden will help him resolve the princess's kidnapping case, and asks that when everything ends, they be rewarded with dinner. After that, she asks what should be done with the 2 men who tortured him, but Sid answers that they were only performing their duties and that he does not care. Meanwhile, because of all the forced bowls of rice and the blood extracted, Alexia is extremely weakened and can barely speak. Poor her. Meanwhile, we see Sid preparing the entire scene, completely excited, so he can make his perfect entrance. When Delta arrives, he delivers his incredible monologue. While drinking a bit of wine, Delta says everything is ready. She explains that the plan is to launch simultaneous attacks on all the hideouts of the cult of Diablo. Spread across the capital, they will search for traces of Princess Alexia's magic at the same time. But then Sid interrupts her, handing her a letter and saying that tonight the world will know them. Meanwhile, we see the two scoundrels who were torturing Sid earlier, whispering about something. When Sid walks by, they try to incriminate him, saying he is wearing one of Alexia's boots. Then they attempt to kill him, but Sid is quick, kills 3, and cuts off the arm of another. While the man with the severed arm talks nonsense, saying he will never escape from this, Sid goes there and kills him too. Beta watches everything from the corner like a fanatic, noting everything he does. Then an explosion occurs, and we see Delta cutting everyone down. Soon we see Iris talking to some of her guards, wondering what is happening to the world and where her sister is. Then the scene switches to Alexia, who remains imprisoned. She tells the monster that it is a bit difficult to sleep because of the noise from the explosions. But while she is there talking to the monster beside her, the mad doctor suddenly arrives, saying they are coming. He is holding a box filled with syringes containing blood, or some insane mixture of it. He grabs one of the syringes and injects it into the monster, which becomes far stronger. The monster then breaks free, and the first thing it does is kill the doctor, that wretched man. At that moment, instead of killing Alexia, it frees her. Right after, it goes out destroying everything, and Alexia runs away to survive. She grabs the key that was on the doctor's body and frees herself from the remaining shackles, and also takes the sword that was beside his corpse. While she walks toward the exit, she ends up encountering her ex-fiancé. That blonde bastard was funding the doctor's research, so he says he cannot let her leave. She becomes enraged, saying she always thought he was out of his mind. He then provokes her, comparing her to her sister, and she becomes extremely furious and rushes at him. The two begin fighting, and she manages to use her power and wound his arm, copying her sister's movement. After that, he says he will show her the abilities of the rounds, and with a single precise strike he disarms her and leaves her corner. After a well-placed punch to the poor girl's face, he says he will take her away. Then our man arrives, Shadow, and he introduces himself, saying he hides in the shadows to hunt the shadows. The blonde man says he is acting arrogant just because he is attacking some of their bases, but he says that not a single main member of the cult was anywhere near that base. He calls the members of Shadow Garden cowards and says that today they will be hunted by him, one of the main members of the group. In the future, the 12th of the rounds, Xenon Griffey. Right after that blonde scoundrel tries to strike Shadow, he simply disappears from his field of vision, appearing right in front of Alexia, asking where the main member of the cult is. Elsewhere, we see the knights trying to fight the monster, but everything is useless. The creature simply throws everyone far into the air. They try once more, executing a triple strike that tears the creature's back with 3 deep cuts. But in a completely unexpected way, the monster regenerates everything in seconds. Realizing they are not dealing with an ordinary monster, the knights receive immediate orders to gather all nearby units and use full force, even if that means destroying city buildings. The population had already been evacuated, so it is fine. At that moment, Princess Iris arrives on the battlefield, and without hesitation she unleashes violent blows against the monster, preparing to finish it once and for all. The creature rises again as if nothing had happened. The knights are shocked by the creature's absurd endurance, and Iris, furious, cuts off one of its arms, but another one simply grows in its place. The princess is not frightened. On the contrary, her determination increases. She realizes she will only defeat it if she tears it apart completely and scatters its pieces across the ground. Before she can cause the creature more suffering, Alpha arrives in time to stop her, and Iris asks who she is, and the woman calmly answers that her name is Alpha. She then releases a devastating strike that forces the monster to return to a more humanoid form, and even as she approaches, she shows compassion for the creature. When Alpha prepares to leave, Iris demands that she come back, but Alpha simply says that her presentation is over, and that Iris should act like a good spectator and just watch. Before disappearing, Alpha reveals that she is from Shadow Garden and that Iris should keep her distance from them. Iris is paralyzed, trying to understand who or what this mysterious group is. An explosion behind her brings her back to reality, reminding her once again of Alexia. Meanwhile, Sid and that blonde scoundrel keep fighting in front of Alexia amid the ruins of the previous clash. During the battle, Zenon begins to understand why so many members of the cult were defeated by Sid. They simply underestimated him. Seeking to display his true strength, the blonde scoundrel activates a technique called Power of a Future Knight of the Round, but nothing works. Every strike, every charge, Sid ignores everything with ease. Alexia even begins to feel an unexpected admiration for Shadow's strength, not imagining that he is the same Sid who pretended to be her boyfriend. Sid then mocks Zenon, saying that this future Knight of the Round power does not come close to what he achieved as a fighter. This enrages Zenon, who charges with a brutal attack, but Sid dodges as if it were nothing. Alexia is surprised, since his physical abilities are absurd, but his sword style is the same as hers. It is simple, direct, and built from scratch. And suddenly Alexia realizes that Sid is the only person who fights exactly like she does. Zenon reaches his limit and demands that Sid reveal his true identity, since no one that's strong should be a simple student. And Sid answers, "We are Shadow Garden, and we hunt those who live in the shadows." In desperation, the blonde man uses his final card, swallowing pills that amplify his strength beyond human limits. His body transforms and his muscles distort, and he assumes a new form, the Third Awakened. Zenon believes that only those capable of fully controlling the power they carry should be allowed to fight among the Knights of the Round. He then unleashes a new force, which he calls the Power of the Almighty, but this only irritates Shadow. He is deeply offended by the fact that Zenon compares himself to a god. For Sid, this is blasphemy, an insult to the true meaning of absolute power. Enraged, Shadow advances and begins delivering brutal strikes against the blonde man. He declares that there is no true strength when someone relies on power that is not their own. And before finishing Zenon, Sid tells a story. He tells the story of a boy who wanted to survive a nuclear bomb. He trained his muscles, his mind, refined his abilities to their highest limit, but even then he could not survive the bomb. Yet he could never give up. So, after years of training, he reached a single conclusion. If he does not want to be vaporized by the bomb, he simply has to become the nuclear explosion itself. He says that the true meaning of all-powerful will now be engraved in his mind. It is then that he uses the most absurd strike in all anime, I am atomic. The explosion completely vaporizes Zenon, and Iris witnesses the blast from a distance. Terrified, she immediately runs to the location, hoping to find Alexia. Alexia, however, remains calm, showing no sign of shock at the explosion that just occurred. When Iris finally finds Alexia, she cannot contain her emotions and runs to hug her sister, relieved. The next day, Alexia returns to her normal routine and goes back to school with Sid, who is once again pretending to be just an ordinary student. She vents about her problems, but Sid is clearly not interested. Even so, Alexia thanks him for the compliment he gave about her sword style. She says that after thinking about it a lot, she began to accept and appreciate her way of fighting. After that, Alexia asks Sid to keep pretending to be her boyfriend for a little longer, but Sid refuses immediately, and she smiles in a very strange way before leaving. Meanwhile, the members of the Shadow Garden congratulate their leader, Lord Shadow, for his recent great achievements. They believe that one day all enemies will be defeated, but they also express concern about the unknown people who have been impersonating the organization. Even so, they assure that those imposters will be properly punished at the right moment. At the same time, Princess Iris begins connecting the dots about the cult of Diablos and the Shadow Garden. She believes there is some obscure connection between these two forces. For that reason, she decides to create a new investigation team led by Glenn Marco. Back at the school, a girl carrying a stack of books bumps into Sid when he accidentally blocks her path. The books fall, and Sid tries to help her stand up, but she remains still, almost paralyzed in front of him, as if she had completely frozen. Somewhere else, a man is chased and captured, begging for his life, but he ends up being killed immediately by the sword of the Shadow Hunter, who announces his identity before vanishing into the darkness. Later, Sid is in a restaurant with his friends, preparing a hot broth. They ask about his relationship with Alexia, and Sid answers that they simply broke up, and that is the end of the subject. His friends explode at him, asking if they had at least gotten close once, and Sid replies that they had not. They become furious, saying that the entire romance was a total waste and calling Sid completely hopeless. One of the friends comments about a place that could help them with that, but the other misunderstands and starts a loud argument. The first then clarifies that the place is called Mitsugoshi, very famous for selling unprecedented products, including something called chocolate, which has supposedly been helping several boys win over girls. Sid was ignoring this entire conversation, just drinking his soup, until he hears the word chocolate. He freezes for a moment, looks upward, and his friends notice and immediately declare, "We're all going together." Even reluctant, Sid ends up agreeing, driven by curiosity about this so-called chocolate. Meanwhile, Sherry is in an office beside her father, Iris, and Alexia. Sherry is introduced to a mysterious object. She believes it is an artifact, but they explain that the item was confiscated from a facility belonging to an organization called the Cult of Diablos, a group about which almost nothing is known. It was given to her because they want Sherry to research it, since she is considered the brightest in the entire kingdom, superior to any other scholar in the field. Sherry is shocked, because she is only a student, but they also explain that the rumors about her brilliance have already spread throughout the city, and have even been mentioned in the Night Academy. Her father assures her that this is a great opportunity, and says that one day she will travel the world with her research. He asks her to trust herself, and after thinking about his words, Sherry finally accepts the task. The officer present adds that the Crimson Order will be assigned to protect her, and Sherry's father is surprised when he hears that name and asks if it is a newly created Night Order. She explains that they are small and discreet orders formed by extremely trustworthy knights. When Sherry confirms that she will take the job, Alexia volunteers to help her, because she wants to discover who these people are and what they want, and they allow it, but demand that Alexia promise to stay away from danger. Alexia thanks them for the concern, and meanwhile, Sid and his friends arrive at Mitsugoshi. The attendant warns that the waiting line is 80 minutes long and worse than any bank queue in Brazil. The boys hesitate, unsure if they should wait or leave so they do not get caught by the curfew. One of them comments that he heard rumors about assassins who attack after nightfall. The other calls him an idiot, claiming that they are 3 knights and nothing will happen. Sid becomes curious about this assassin, but his friends completely ignore him and keep walking. As they walk, a young woman approaches and asks Sid if he would like to participate in a survey. His friends immediately say that they also want to participate, but she informs them that she only needs one person and takes Sid with her. They walk into a massive shopping center and Sid looks around, realizing that he is simply following the girl without knowing where she is taking him. He reminds her about the survey, but she leads him to a secret door. It was all just a pretext to bring him to a meeting with Gamma, one of the Shadow Garden members whose life he saved and whom he does not even remember training in the past. Gamma is sitting on a throne, excited to see him, and she quickly descends the stairs to greet him. But she trips and falls face first on the floor, bleeding. Sid comments internally that she is one of the most intelligent people he knows, but also one of the least skilled physically. While they clean the blood from her face, Gamma asks Sid to sit, and when he sits on her throne, Sid thinks that he truly feels like a king, as if he finally were the real eminence in the shadows. He wonders how Gamma managed to build and manage such a luxurious place, and Sid tries to offer a reward for everything she has done, but she refuses, saying that she is not worthy of his honor and that she will never forget that he saved her life. Sid then asks if business is going well. Gamma explains that she has several investors and that she has around 1 billion Zen ready to use immediately. Sid is shocked, but Gamma, however, thinks it is not much. Sid starts imagining how she managed to create all of that, using only fragments of his teachings, without him supervising anything. He thinks he should feel happy, but what truly impresses him is how much profit she makes. The guy only cares about money and nothing else, a genuine capitalist. After Sid settles in, Gamma informs him that an important incident is about to occur. A mysterious assassin has been appearing in the capital, pretending to be part of the Shadow Garden. They are already investigating, but they still have not captured the culprit, and she assures him that this imposter will be punished. Sid remembers his friend's comments about an assassin wandering the city, and he tells Gamma that he has an idea of who it might be and that he will investigate personally. Gamma immediately begins praising him, saying she expected nothing less from the Sovereign of the Shadows. As he starts to walk away, Gamma introduces Nu to him, saying that she is the newest member and that he may use her however he wishes. He says he will call her if he needs anything, and as he is about to leave, he says that he wants chocolate. While they talked, he was stealing some of her zen, and she informs him that the chocolates will be given to him for free, and he seems very excited. Soon after, we see Sid and his friends running with chocolates in their hands, almost late for the curfew, and they complain to Sid for returning too late, saying he was flirting with the girl from the survey, and he apologizes and reminds them that he brought chocolate for them. While running, he thinks that Alexia is the assassin and wonders why. He concludes that she probably lost her sanity, since she was not very stable to begin with. As he runs, he hears the sounds of swords, so he stops abruptly. His friends turn around and ask him why he stopped. He invents the biggest excuse possible, saying that he ate too much chocolate and needs to go to the bathroom. Otherwise, he will completely soil himself right there. He tells his friends not to wait for him because he feels extremely sick. Then we see Alexia fighting the Shadow Hunter. While she fights, she notices that he has split into 3, and she starts facing them alone, until Sid himself appears, and she realizes they are imposters. 2 of them are killed immediately while the other escapes. When Sid tries to leave, Alexia stops him to ask what he wants, what he uses all that power for, and who he is fighting. Sid turns and tells her to stay out of it and vanishes. Sid goes out searching for the one who escaped and finally finds him. He confronts him, asking if he thinks he can run away from him, until Gamma appears. Since she did not expect him to capture the man so quickly, she asks to take him away so she can gather more information. Sid tells her not to ruin everything, and she says she will not. She threatens the imposter, saying that she is not as merciful as Lord Shadow. Somewhere else, we see Alexia explaining what happened to Iris. Iris asks if she is alright, and Alexia begins by saying that the assassin is not from the Shadow Garden. Then Iris says that maybe the assassin belongs to a different organization. That easily assumed the name. Alexia answers saying that this is not what Shadow told her. When she encountered him, someone from the Shadow Garden was defending the royal captain from those simultaneous attacks, and that person's name was Alpha. Shadow was fighting against a cult of Diablo. Iris says they may discover something when the artifact is deciphered, and Alexia asks Iris who she thinks the enemy is, the Shadow Garden or the cult of Diablo. Iris answers that it is both, and she says she will not allow anyone to cause destruction in her kingdom. Right after that, we see Sid on the train with his friends, who mock him because of what happened the day before, since he ended up soiling his entire pants, saying he was lucky. Sid answers saying he thinks the teasing that day will be even worse and prepares himself for the worst. His friends ask if he brought the chocolate, and he confirms it, and they get extremely excited, declaring that the day will be Operation Gift Giver, saying they can't wait to give chocolate to the girls. Both friends take their chocolates and try to give them to the girls, but both fail completely. Sid sits in the library, picks up his own chocolate, and says he will give it to the first girl he sees. He begins walking, then sees a girl named Sherry who is studying the artifact she was given to examine. He simply places the chocolate on top of her book and says she can keep it. Then he leaves, and Sherry looks at the chocolate, confused. Sherry is in her room studying, looking at the chocolate and wondering what she should do with it. Her father walks in coughing and sees the chocolate, and she explains it was a gift from a boy. He says that must be love at first sight, and her father asks what she will say in return, but she becomes very confused. He explains better, saying that although the research is important, she also needs to learn how to interact with other people, because to him that is what school is supposed to be. He asks how the deciphering of the artifact is going. She says she has already started, and then he begins coughing louder and more frequently. Sherry says she will call the doctor immediately, but he stops her, saying he feels much better. He only feels lucky to have a daughter like her. She says she is the one who is lucky to have a father like him. And then he tells her that her mother was a good researcher, so she will handle the work. Sid's attention is then drawn to a poster announcing a fencing tournament. As he looks at it, he is followed by Niu, the new member of the Shadow Garden, who happens to be wearing a very nice school uniform. When he sees her, he thinks she is a student. However, she reveals that she was only trying to blend in, wearing a school uniform so she would not attract too much attention. She updates Sid on the details of the suspect dressed in black whom they had captured earlier. It seems he had undergone an extremely powerful brainwashing. Unfortunately, the same thing happened to the other recognized individuals, such as the vanguard of the cult of Diablos, called the Third Children. Niu had difficulties extracting any information from the man, due to the effectiveness of this brainwashing. At this point, Sid shows no interest in what she is saying. He is simply ignoring everything. On the other hand, he is far more concerned with the tournament that his friends had shown him earlier. They try to persuade him to participate in the competition, but he does not seem very interested. As a last resort, they attempt to convince him by explaining that they would participate if it were not for their injuries. Apparently, they took arrows to the knee, and only a few people will get that reference. Sid, however, insists repeatedly that he is not taking it seriously at all, although he is slightly interested in the tournament. Surprisingly, they try using the strategy of making girls like him as a way to convince Sid, but he does not fall for it, since he is Sigma and responds by punching everyone. Sid takes the poster from their hands and examines it carefully, while his friends roll on the floor in pain from the strikes. Then he remembers that Neo mentioned the cult of Diablos, which had started that tournament as a method of recruiting orphans. They administer drugs to wash their brains and turn them into children of Diablo. It seems this was an operational method used by the cult many years ago. In addition, Neo suspects that the cult is only using his name and Shadow Garden in an attempt to lure them out of their hiding places. Even after hearing this, Sid remains determined to compete in the event, and at that moment, he is informed of the arrival in the capital of a first child named Rex. From what it seems, the first child is someone who developed a sense of identity, despite being one of the children. Neo is very worried about the fact that they are sending named children to the capital, and also about the possibility that there is another objective behind it. While Sid thinks about what she said, he concludes that the matter requires extra consideration. Neo, however, watches her master depart with admiration, believing that he will find the best possible solution. She calls his unique ability to solve problems the wisdom of the shadows. A few days later, the competition begins and the students start screaming in excitement just to see the two competitors face each other. Even though Princess Alexia is still injured, the students keep saying that she would do well in the tournament, despite not participating. Even so, they remain confident that Rose, the president of the student council, will be a formidable opponent. Meanwhile, the students place bets on who they think will win the competition, and they seem to be having a lot of fun. On the other hand, this is not the case for Sid's friends, who seem to have used all the money they had by betting on fighters who ended up losing their matches. While they lament, it is announced that the next fight will be between Rose, the president of the student council, and an unknown boy. Her opponent ends up being none other than Sid himself, which they see as a huge surprise. While he stands there in front of her, he spends the time examining her and finally concludes that she is the most skilled swordswoman in the academy. As soon as the fight begins, it seems that Sid is ready to demonstrate advanced techniques. On the other hand, it turns out these techniques are not for fighting. Instead, these are techniques he uses to make himself look even more like a background character. Sid quickly puts a blood pill in his mouth and allows himself to be struck by Rose, while the two advance toward each other with the intent to defeat the opponent. Sid then loses his balance and falls to the ground, blood pouring from his mouth. And this protagonist is absolutely insane. While the students are watching, they are very excited, and the referee is about to declare Rose the winner, until Sid indicates that the fight is not over yet. At that moment, he stands up and makes another attack against Rose, repeating the same humiliating movements several times, even more determined to display his side character techniques. After several blows and defeats, Rose is perplexed to see that he continues fighting. However, she respects his level of determination and insists that she was wrong for underestimating him. At that exact moment, she decides to charge at him with all her strength. For everyone's relief, and out of genuine precaution due to Sid's potentially fatal injuries, the referee intervenes and pushes Sid out of the way, preventing him from having to face her attack. Right after, he announces Rose as the winner of the tournament. And when Sid hears this, he becomes furious, because he still had many background techniques to display. On the other hand, Rose is not surprised by the referee's decision, and is shocked by how much pain Sid endured during their fight. After that, she acknowledges that Sid won the battle of spirit between them, and expresses her respect for him. Sid leaves the fight with bandages wrapped around his head, despite not having suffered any injury. As he walks through the school, he is approached by a young girl, who seems quite worried about his condition. She asks how he is before they go together to a nearby cafe to drink some orange juice. Shortly after, she gives him some freshly baked cookies, and begs him to be her friend. Sid does not understand why she offered cookies or why she wants to be his friend, but even so, he accepts. Immediately, she informs her father, who had been sitting at a table behind her the entire time. and this fills her with emotion. Sid recognizes her father as Lutheran Bernard, a master swordsman, who is on the list of people he must never interact with in order to maintain his secret. The two of them end up being extremely concerned about Sid's injury and insist that he visit the doctor, which he agrees to do on his way back home. This is only to prevent them from following him and discovering that he is not actually injured. Sherry's father asks Sid to be kind to his daughter because she has no friends. This ends up being a shocking request for him, as he does not understand why he needs to be in this situation. He ends up using his injury as an excuse to avoid her for a few days. When Sherry returns home, she remains worried about Sid and thinks about the possibility of visiting him. However, she remembers that Princess Alexia and Sid might be dating, when her thoughts are interrupted by the idea that the two of them might be together. To clarify this, she decides to visit Alexia personally so she can ask her. When she arrives at Alexia's house, she is informed that the two are no longer dating and never were, because their relationship was always a farce. When she hears this, she becomes very excited and tells the princess that she just became friends with Sid and wanted to make sure that he and the princess were not together. She then explains how happy she is with the news and leaves right afterward. The princess, on the other hand, does not seem very happy and does everything she can to hide her own jealousy. Meanwhile, the students wait anxiously for the explanation regarding the procedure for voting for the student council the next day. After Rose and another council member finally arrive, the two begin explaining what happened. At that moment, members of the cult of Diablos release a massive shield around the school, causing the students to lose their ability to use magic. This happens first. It seems that Sid is the only one who can recognize this phenomenon. While all of this unfolds, Princess Alexia is on her way to the academy. She is most likely extremely jealous about Sid and Sherry, so she goes there to see for herself. However, to her surprise, the school gates are already closed when she arrives, and she finds this very strange. As she pays attention, she asks her father for help. With the students still trapped in the academy, Princess Iris and the knights are worried about what the next action will be. They cannot do anything due to the magical barrier surrounding the school, and their frustration increases when they realize their specialists are also trapped inside the academy. Meanwhile, inside, the students remain tied up and gathered together. Their current condition leaves President Rose irritated, since she asks why they need to be tied up when they cannot do anything at all with their magic annulled. On the other hand, Sid and Sherry try to find a solution for the magical barrier around the school. Apparently, the barrier is being raised through the use of the Eye of Avarice. After some time, Sherry manages to create a device that can control the Eye of Avarice. Although Sid finds this impressive, he is worried about the hidden tunnels. At that moment, Sherry opens a secret passage behind a display and prepares to descend the dark stairs in the hope of helping her father. When she looks at the dark staircase, Sherry is shaken, as she remembers the night of her mother's death. That night, her mother was stabbed multiple times. With no one else to care for her, the man she calls her father appeared and offered to take her in. Since her mother had been his dear friend, the love and affection he showed her motivated her to look for him amid all the terrible things happening at the school. Ready to descend the stairs, Sid wishes her good luck, and she thanks him before moving on. Back in the place where all the students are being held, President Rose discourages one of them from doing anything, since he is very quiet and wants to confront the men. She becomes even more convinced that facing them is not a good idea after evaluating their leader and noticing how powerful he is. This, however, does not stop them, since they are eager to fight these men. When they think about advancing against them, they hear a noise from above. At that moment, they witness several men shooting at the students, which strengthens their determination to rebel. But Princess Rose continues telling them to remain calm. They, however, believe that everyone will be killed if they do nothing. At that moment, Sherry reaches the hall above the students and can see everything that is happening. As she watches, she sees the leader of the men recharging the Eye of Avarice, which gives her a chance to end the hostage situation. Without wasting time, she throws her magic device at him. A bright light covers the entire area, deactivating the power of the Eye of Avarice. With the magical barrier deactivated, President Rose does not waste time before attacking one of the men. She then informs the students that their magic has been unlocked, encouraging them to fight back. Upon hearing this, the students begin advancing against their captors without mercy, terrifying them completely. However, their leader orders them to kill the students before fleeing. While they fight, President Rose aims at the leader and is determined to reach him no matter what. Unfortunately, her efforts are useless, as the men surround her, giving her no chance to reach the leader. In the heat of battle, President Rose senses a powerful presence, and at that moment, Sid appears in his true form as Shadow. Fortunately for the students, he arrives with an army, and at that moment, he introduces them as Shadow Garden. Ignoring the students, they attack the imposters, taking them down with ease. And since those men are now busy fighting the real Shadow Garden, President Rose orders the students to leave the auditorium immediately. Naturally, the students waste no time and run to safety, leaving the fight to the real combatants. Meanwhile, Sherry continues looking for her father, who is nowhere to be found. On the other hand, the leader of those men, whose name I forgot, releases a chemical that sets the building on fire. With the barrier down, the princess and the knights break into the place. They end up seeing the students outside, already safe, while the building is engulfed in flames. When she asks what happened, President Rose says they were saved by a mysterious organization called Shadow Garden. Hearing that name once again leaves Princess Iris irritated and deeply worried. While all the students are safe, Sherry remains inside the burning building, still searching for her father. However, the leader of the strange men goes to the office in the building in order to remove his disguise. Before doing that, he ends up burning some books, and at that moment, Sid arrives and asks why he is wearing such a costume. As surprising as the question may seem, he reveals that the leader is actually Professor Lutheran Barnett, Sherry's father. With his identity revealed, the professor removes the mask and demands to know how Sid found out. Sid teases him, saying he noticed because of the way he walks. At that moment, Sid demands to know what he is doing with all of this, since he never seemed like someone who displayed signs of malice. It is then that the professor reveals he is doing this because he never had the chance to reach the highest and most glorified level of sword mastery he hoped to achieve, despite being exceptional. This dream of his was stopped by an illness, right when he was very close to reaching it. Furthermore, he tells Sid about his involvement in Sherry's mother's research, which led him to obtain the Eye of Averett. However, at the time, she believed it was dangerous and suggested they hand it over to the government to keep it secure. This ended up making the professor extremely angry, leading him to kill Sherry's mother in the most horrible way possible. When Sherry found her mother, she never knew what had happened and continued her mother's research, unaware that the man she considered her father was actually the one responsible for killing her own mother. Upon hearing this, Sid states that everyone has something they claim to possess in their journey through life. After the two share their strange and brief ideologies about life, they decide to stop talking and fight. Sid then draws his sword to face the professor, and as expected, he uses the most useless form of Grim possible. This gives the professor a feeling of relief, since he had just defeated the only one who seemed to know his true identity. After killing Sid, he turns to leave, and shortly after turning around, he hears a voice asking where he thinks he is going. At that moment, he turns and sees Sid in his true form as Shadow. Even though Shadow's presence frightens him, he tries to act as if he is not afraid, staring directly at Shadow. He ends up acknowledging that he is at a disadvantage. Right after that, he removes the Eye of Avarice and merges it with his own body in a way that triggers his rebirth and makes him more powerful. Surprisingly, his supposedly powerful magic is still no match for Shadow's power, who blocks his attacks with little effort. Soon after, he cuts the professor's shoulder, who becomes enraged and charges toward Shadow. As they fight, the professor talks about his plan to accuse Shadow of everything that happened. Surprisingly, the professor reveals that he prepared evidence, testimonies, and everything necessary to make it completely believable that Shadow would be declared a traitor, making the entire world hunt him. When Shadow hears all of this, he seems not to care about anything the professor said. Instead, he states that he would gladly accept all the hatred, adding that this would not change anything, since Shadow Garden has always operated without caring about the perspective of others besides themselves. These words end up leaving the professor deeply worried, and since his previous plan of blaming Shadow seems useless, he attacks him furiously, hoping to inflict heavy damage. But Shadow, once again, evades every attempt. He then stabs him several times, remembering what the professor did to Sherry's mother, before piercing his heart and destroying the Eye of Greed. The professor's death gives Shadow a soothing justification, one he hopes Sherry will feel. At that moment, Sherry finally finds her father, but in the same condition in which she saw her mother years before. She only screams, telling him to wake up, and Shadow becomes tempted to reveal that he was the one who killed her mother, but decides to drop it, since it would be harder for her if she found out. Later, Shadow Garden sees a statement blaming Shadow for everything that happened, and this makes them even more determined to follow Shadow's resolution. The next day, Sherry meets Sid. She thanks him for everything he did to help her the day before, saying she never would have managed without his help. Then she informs him of her decision to study at Stereo, in Lagos, a city known for science. Before leaving, she tells Sid there is something she must do, and she chose to go to Stereo in search of knowledge to accomplish it. She also says she wishes she had gotten the chance to know Sid better. And as she picks up her bag to leave, Sid asks what this thing she needs to do is, and she answers that it is a secret. Due to the destruction of the school caused by the violent battle between the fake Shadow Garden and the real Shadow Garden, the students are forced to return home, and this ends up becoming an early summer break for them. However, with all the students gone, Sid remains in the dormitory since he has nothing to do at home, even though he starts to realize he also has nothing to do at school. As he spends his day resting, he receives a letter from Alpha, saying he needs to go to the Holy Land, Lindy Warren. Meanwhile, one of Lord Shadow's girls, Beta, looks at herself in the mirror. At first she appears quite discouraged, but suddenly she transforms her body into a supposedly perfect one. At that moment, she reveals how Lord Shadow gave her the power to change her destiny when he first met her. Nothing too surprising. She simply decided at that moment to use her power to alter her current form, since she does not consider it very admirable. Since then, she has become obsessed with him, and this led her to write and create the story about how he considered her his charming young alpha. Even though her stories do not flow as smoothly as she expected. This happens mainly because she thinks they are too dramatic. She also blames herself for using a questionable character as the female protagonist, and frustrated with how poorly her writing is going, she decides to go outside for some fresh air. Outside the building, she meets Y, and the two enter a fierce dispute about who has the bigger airbag. At that moment, Y informs Beta about Lord Shadow's sudden interest and the intense look he supposedly gave her. She states that she recently felt the intense passion of that gaze in her heart, and upon hearing this, Beta becomes offended and assumes it must be a mistake. But Y insists it is true and not an error. She also tries to tease Beta, saying she probably would have received the same look at some moment, since she, Y, had a larger airbag. At this point, Beta finds the conversation extremely uncomfortable and likely searches for a way to leave. Fortunately for her, one of the girls named Neil appears as Alpha's new director. Meanwhile, Princess Iris and Princess Alexia are at a shopping mall, buying clothes for the trip to the most recent Holy Land. Apparently, Princess Alexia is being sent there as a special guest for the goddess trial. Since Princess Iris accompanied her to the mall, she asks her sister to follow the capital's trends. Princess Alexia, however, assures her sister that she will be able to use the time to invest in matters related to the recent events in the kingdom and gather useful information to help them deal with the unresolved issue. She also asks her sister to remain calm, since her innocent appearance would make her free of suspicion. Hearing this, Princess Iris becomes optimistic, since she believes people are less cautious around Alexia than around herself. Although she does not want her sister to get involved in the investigation and would have preferred not to tell her anything. As they talk, they are interrupted by the mall president, who apologizes for not having come to greet them earlier. Upon arriving, she offers some delicious snacks, and seeing how tasty they are, Princess Alexia demands that some of them be taken to her room. Right afterward, she asks the president if there are any other new items she can choose from, since she will be traveling. She asks to see the clothes the president recommends. Hearing this, Princess Iris remembers they have already bought party dresses. However, Princess Alexia dislikes this answer and demands to see something more casual, something she can wear every day. Hearing her speak, the president understands exactly what she needs. She draws the princess's attention to a clothing line she believes they will like. Surprisingly, the princesses are shown several pieces of very appealing women's underwear. Of course they are. Seeing these items, the princesses are shocked, while Iris complains about the lack of fabric in them and about the fact that they are transparent. Alexia declares her confidence in her own backside. Hearing this, Iris remembers that this is not the point, as she says that Alexia pulls the underwear pieces off the mannequin, ready to try them on. The two continue arguing in the fitting room, and realizing her sister will not stop being difficult, Alexia clearly asks whether those underwear pieces truly deserve such an unshakable rejection. In response, Iris is left speechless, unable to give a definite answer, and this leads Alexia to victory, making her buy the lingerie and several similar items. Meanwhile, later on, When the school building was in flames, students ran around trying to save whoever they could find. Princess Rose, however, remained determined to find Sid. She does this because she had apparently fallen in love with him right after he saved her life. Upon seeing her, Sid, who was lying down covered in bandages, becomes frustrated. This is because he did not want to be disturbed at that moment. Unfortunately for him, his act of heroism ended up securing the heart of the student council president. And that day, President Rose remains at Sid's side. During the trip, he is quite irritated by her insistence. He wishes he had waited until the night, since he could have reached the Holy Land easily. He even blames himself for choosing to take a train like a true side character. And throughout the journey, Sid must deal with her excesses. She wants to know why he is going to the Holy Land, and whether it is because of the goddess trial. In response, he admits that this is indeed the reason, but in truth, he has no idea why Alpha summoned him. He simply assumes it might be because of this goddess trial. As he thinks about it, Princess Alexia thanks him again for saving her life. Then she confidently states that the path ahead of them together will be thorny. Surprisingly, Princess Iris declares that no one would approve their union or give them the blessing needed for them to be together, no matter how little Sid cares. Still, she continues talking about the possibility of them being together. And this time, she encourages him to win the goddess trial, saying his victory would allow her to talk to her father about being with a brave young man like him. While she keeps talking, Sid does not care at all. He is focused on the divine teachings she placed before him. Looking more closely, he recognizes one of the sacred sites as Lindworm, the place he is probably heading to. It was the site where the goddess had once descended to Earth to grant power to 3 heroes. At that moment, she keeps talking about how thorny the path for them to be together will be. She also demands that they keep their relationship secret and tell no one about it. At this point, Sid realizes what she has been trying to do the whole time. Apparently, she was only trying to convert him to her religion. This makes him even more eager to have some space. And that night, she goes to his cabin to see how he is. But he is not there. Seeing this, she becomes disappointed and returns to her own cabin. If she had looked up, she would have seen Sid hiding directly above the door, protecting himself from her constant conversations about them being together. After 2 days avoiding her and keeping his distance, Sid finally arrives in the Holy Land. While walking through the city, she sees her favorite author, Natsumi, at a signing event. For the first time during the trip, she leaves him voluntarily because she wants to meet her favorite author. When she leaves, Sid looks at the books written by Natsumi. Seeing them, he believes these stories were shamelessly plagiarized. The plots make him realize the writer was likely reincarnated as well. And wanting to know who this writer is, he goes to the signing event. Upon standing before the author, he realizes it is none other than Beta. She had apparently written the stories he had told her about his past life stories he shared to help her find inspiration for her writing. However, he becomes very disappointed that she simply wrote them exactly as he said. When Beta returns the signed book, she informs him that the mission details are written there. He, however, does not pay much attention and becomes angry that she did this, saying how disappointed he is. After the event, Rose catches up to Sid again and starts talking, this time about the book. When Sid opens it, he sees a strange writing in the space reserved for the author's autograph. The two find it difficult to decipher and do not know what it means, but Sid thinks it is very cool. On the other hand, we see Alpha, who finds herself in a murder scene. Seeing the bodies of the high officials of the Holy Land, she tries to discover who killed them. While she observes the bodies, a guard enters, and upon seeing her leaving the scene, he assumes she is responsible for the murder. This leads them to order the closing of the cathedral in hopes of capturing the killer. The sound of the bell announcing that there is a fugitive murder suspect is heard by Sid, who laughs loudly when he hears it. While watching from the top of a rooftop, he sees someone moving in the shadows, and shortly afterward he reaches them. And he does not do much, because Y cuts the man down with her powers. Seeing her, he asks about the report of the most recent mission, and when she explains everything to him, he decides to proceed with his plans, demanding that she not speak while executing hers. Sid reaches safety beyond warm and decides to take a bath. On the way, he states his preferences, saying what he likes and what he does not like. Although he thinks there are insignificant things he enjoys and dislikes, one of those things is hot springs. Right after that, he enters a hot spring humming while enjoying the calm warmth it provides. Surprisingly, he does not seem to be the only one who enjoys hot springs, since Princess Alexia was also there and becomes shocked when she sees him enter. Sid completely ignores her, acting as if she were not even there. while still enjoying the water's warmth. Still nervous, Princess Alexia gathers courage to start a conversation and asks about his injuries, since he seems recovered. She is surprised to see him, because she had cut him deeply in their last encounter. And in response, Sid calls her a killing machine, but says nothing more when she asks what he said. Instead, he wants to know why she is in the city, and she explains she was invited for the goddess trial. Then she asks why he is also in the city, and he answers that a friend invited him, since there would be a very fun event happening. Acting ignorant, he asks what exactly people do in the goddess trial, and she finds it surprisingly strange that he came all the way to Lindworm without knowing what it is. To explain, she says it is a combat ritual in which ancient warriors are awakened from the sanctuary to compete against challengers. Hearing this, Sid believes the fighters will be facing ghosts, remembering that Alpha had mentioned something about it. In the middle of his thoughts, Alexia interrupts him, discouraging him from hoping to participate in the combat ritual. Moreover, she belittles him by reminding him that the ancient warriors only respond to the call of challengers they consider worthy. The princess also reveals she will not participate in the ritual. She also makes the shocking revelation about the death of the cathedral's archbishop. Although this does not seem to surprise Sid at all, his attitude, without showing any interest, does not stop the princess from revealing the real reason she came to Lindworm. Apparently, she was sent to audit the dead archbishop, and after saying all that, she decides to stop, because she cannot tell anything else to an outsider. But it is very strange because she has already told him practically everything, right? Even so, she tries to convince him to join the Crimson Knights if he wants to know more, but he instantly refuses. While the two remain alone in the hot spring, Alexia reveals her thoughts about Sid, assuming it seems like he always wants to touch her. Sid, however, quietly tells her to push those ideas away, since he makes a point of not looking at her the entire time they are together in the water, and that, according to him, would make them more comfortable while bathing. At that moment, he asks her to stop staring at his body. In her defense, she tries to make disparaging comments about his body, but becomes shocked when he stands up to prove one should never judge a book by its cover. By showing his Excalibur, he leaves her astonished and completely shocked, and on the next day, Alexia meets the acting archbishop, demanding to conduct the audit, but he cancels it before she even arrives there, leading her to ask why he decided to do that. He states the royal family sent her to audit the archbishop, who is now dead. Moreover, he says that he needs to capture the murderer of the archbishop, and therefore he has no time for the princess's hobbies. After that, he asks her to leave church matters to the church, asking her to simply sit and enjoy the goddess's judgment. This makes Alexia furious and determined to obtain her father's permission to proceed with the audit. Still annoyed with the interim archbishop, Princess Alexia becomes even more irritated with Beta and her disguise as the author Natsumi. She feels that Natsumi's behavior is far too perfect to be real, and becomes even more nauseated by Natsumi's large chest, because she has the feeling that Natsumi uses it to attract her fans. On the other hand, Natsumi recognizes Alexia as the character who tries to approach her beloved Shadow. She, however, believes that her Lord Shadow would never have any interest in the princess, and noticing Natsumi's suspicious stare, the princess steps on her foot. While the interim archbishop begins the goddess's judgment and the people are very excited. One after another, the archbishop calls and presents the day's competitors. First, he introduces a challenger from the kingdom of Oriana named Top Baterio. After that, a member of the audience comments to another that an ancient warrior cannot leave after being summoned, not until either the ancient warrior or the challenger is defeated. According to him, this has already led to a challenger's death in the past, and the other then asks why anyone tries so hard to enter the judgment if it can lead to death. His question is answered by the fact that defeating an ancient warrior grants the victor a commemorative medal. With this medal, the challenger has permission to go to any knight order in the world, and will be hired immediately. Meanwhile, Sid pays attention to the conversation, and, after hearing it, realizes that he would have no chance of acting as an eminence in Shadow if he decided to fight. Even so, that does not stop him from fantasizing about entering the competition as Shadow, and giving the audience the spectacle of a battle while everyone wonders who he is. On the other hand, none of the challengers manage to summon an ancient warrior, which means that all are unworthy, and at that moment, Sid realizes he has not seen Alpha since he arrived in Lindworm. Without his knowledge, Alpha seems to be on a delicate mission on her own. Meanwhile, near the end of the challenge, Sid is called as the final challenger. At first, he does not even notice that they are referring to him, and when he finally realizes it, he is shocked, although not as shocked as Natsumi and Alexia. His announcement as a challenger excites the crowd, since they assume he is the best student in his academy. Sid, however, sits in silence, not understanding why he was chosen. But before making a decision, he considers 3 options. The first is not to fight, but then he would be forced to reveal his true identity as an eminence in shadow. The second is to run away, but he dismisses that because he does not want to offend the island of divine teachings and be expelled from the academy. And the third option is to cause confusion. So he decides to choose the last one, and to do that, he simply appears as Lord Shadow announcing his presence. The Archbishop becomes frightened when he sees him, but Shadow moves forward and summons an ancient warrior. Surprisingly, he ends up summoning the fearsome Aurora, the Witch of Calamity, who once rained chaos and destruction upon the world. Upon seeing Aurora, Natsumi recognizes her immediately, while Alexia, on the other hand, is lost, since she had never heard of her, while the Archbishop thinks Lord Shadow is unlucky, wondering how he managed to summon the most powerful witch in all history. However, he believes that Shadow is a low-level bandit, and assumes he is powerless against the supposedly powerful Aurora. Wasting no time, Aurora launches several attacks at Shadow, who spends his time dodging them. Strategically, he runs around her, waiting for the right moment and then studying, until he finally awakens with his sword. The fact that Lord Shadow defeated so easily someone he considered so powerful greatly surprises the interim Archbishop. Soon after, they are shocked as they witness the magical revelation, meaning that the sanctuary responded to Shadow's call. Upon witnessing this, Alpha becomes even more convinced. Later that night, Sid praises himself for having done a good job as a background character, using his power as an eminence in Shadow. It is then that a giant red door appears, with some drawings on it. At first he tries to avoid it, teleporting to another pillar, but it appears again, and trying to avoid the door, he keeps moving from side to side. But the door does not give up on him so easily, until he finally decides to try seeing what is behind that door. Meanwhile, at the sanctuary, the 3 girls are present. During the goddess's judgment in the cathedral, that same giant door ended up appearing, making everyone wonder what that thing was. At first, they question what will come out of the door, perhaps a new warrior or a demon. But behind it emerges the Archbishop, who is surprised by what he sees, saying that the sanctuary probably responded to Shadow. Surprised by what he said, Rosie asks what he meant by responded, and he explains that it is the day of the year when the sanctuary's door is open. However, the appearance of a weak door in the middle of the judgment had never happened before, which surprises everyone. It is known that the sanctuary's door remains hidden in the cathedral, but it is not an ordinary door. It is said that this door has the ability to change its shape and location at will, to respond to those who seek it and those who are worthy of passing through it. This sanctuary door also has other forms, and each of them has different shapes and directions, but right now they cannot tell which of the doors appeared before them. Suddenly, the door begins to open and everyone in the judgment is instructed to leave. That is because no one should approach the door, which leads to the judgment being cancelled. When the Archbishop and the princesses were about to leave the place, Alpha and the Shadow Garden appear in the cathedral, knocking out the guards and threatening the princesses and the bishop to stay silent until the door closes. Right after that, Alpha and some of the cult members disappear through the door. Then, Beta tries to take the Archbishop with her, but when the girls are about to defend him, Natsumi is captured and a sword is placed at her neck, as a way to prevent the others from acting. Alexia says she is not exactly a very gentle person, but tells Rose that maybe they should simply let Natsumi die. But Rose refuses, and Natsumi tells them to leave her there and take care of themselves. It is then that Beta demands that the Archbishop and Natsumi be taken together. The Archbishop refuses, saying that this would only happen in the afterlife, and suddenly, a flash of a sword appears, attacking Beta, but she manages to dodge. Although not completely, since part of her 2 melons are floating in the air. But since those airbags are made of venom slime, which is Shadow's power, they recompose easily. Then, in the blink of an eye, a sequence of strikes occurs and, in the end, the victim is Executor Venom, who had come to help the Archbishop, and Beta is the one who kills this so-called Venom. The Archbishop is shocked by what just happened and, at the same time, Beta is furious, with beams of light coming from her eyes. She angrily asks if the Archbishop saw anything and, in response, he denies having seen anything. Even so, she grabs him and flies into the door along with him, followed by the other cult members, who end up taking Natsumi with them. The princesses are very confused by this, because they wonder what the Archbishop might have seen. They themselves could not understand what happened, knowing that only the Archbishop managed to see it, and Natsumi also cannot be left behind. Alexia quickly enters through the door after them, even when an unknown voice tells her not to do that. Because of that, Princess Rose, worried about her sister, also enters the door before it closes completely. Upon entering, they find themselves in a sanctuary where, according to legend, the left arm of the demon Diablos was sealed. Alpha and her cult members, Natsumi, and the Archbishop are also there. After that, Alpha explains that the left arm of the demon Diablos was sealed there, which was sealed in that place after he had been defeated by the hero Oliver. The Archbishop seems quite bothered by this and asks Alpha if she is there to tell a fairy tale, or to show the demon's arm. Alpha tells them that they are there to learn about the cult of Diablos, and the Archbishop is surprised, and she says she knows that he cannot answer any questions, and that is why they came personally. Alpha and her cult came there precisely to learn that story of the demon Diablos. And there they see the true statue of the hero Oliver, and, to their surprise, the hero Oliver is, in fact, a woman different from the male statue that exists in the city. Alpha says that they know the true story behind the cult of Diablos and its objective. To everyone's surprise, she looks exactly like the hero Oliver. Upon seeing this, the Archbishop screams, saying that she is a possessed elf, and that she should be dead. Alpha appears behind him, asking if he knows anything about them, and he cannot answer, only trembling in fear. Alpha says that they also know the stories of the possessed, and that this must be a nuisance to the church, since it is so anxious to keep things as they are. Rose is confused, unable to understand what she meant. To help, Alpha explains that they discovered the objective of the cult of Diablos, which is to bring the left arm back to life. However, they still do not know the cult's true final goal, so she proposes that everyone enter to discover it for themselves, opening the door to the cemetery of memories. Alpha places her hand on the door, and her hand triggers her powers, revealing patterns as the door gradually unlocked. Suddenly, a large mechanism releases itself, opening the path for a vortex to form. And with water bursting out and a very bright light coming from outside, the Archbishop is shocked. He asks how it was possible for her to open the door. And Alpha, helping his understanding, speaks of the magical power of the demons and of the warriors who fought a great battle behind the gate, who joined together to open that door. The vortex, according to her, holds memories that have nowhere else to go. And Alpha explains that that place is a graveyard of ancient memories and grudges. In the light stands the hero Oliver, as they begin their journey inside the memories. Meanwhile, on the other side, Sid, after entering through the giant door, arrives in a room where he finds Gamma tied to a chair. He asks if she was the one who summoned him there, but she answers no. She then mentions the battle they had some time ago, saying she enjoyed fighting him, and he did too. Although she says her memories are incomplete, she knows that he was the strongest during the fight. She asks how he entered the memories, and that leads him to explain his encounter with the giant door before ending up there. He also asks how she arrived in that place, and she tells him she has no memory of leaving after they fought. She only remembers waking up there. Seeing that there is nothing to do there, Sid tries to leave without freeing her from the restraints, but she stops him, asking at least to be released. Since she is tied with a straitjacket, he cuts it open with his sword. In the process of cutting her free, he also tears the entire straitjacket, leaving her without clothes. She comments that she had been restrained for more than 1,000 years, although she is not sure if it was that long, but she knows it has been a very long time. Then, in the blink of an eye, her straitjacket transforms into clothing and high heels, leaving her quite elegant. Finally free, she tells Sid they should work together, since he wants to get out, and she wants to escape that place as well. Although she says she knows how to escape, even though she has never left the room before. She tells him that the sanctuary they are in is a prison of memories created from ancient battles, and that only by going to the center and destroying the magic core will she be able to leave. What she means is that when the magic core is destroyed, everything will disappear, which will also help Sid leave. Because of that, the sanctuary will cease to exist, and she does not seem very concerned. She informs him that they cannot use their magical power there, which indicates they are very close to the center of the sanctuary. Even if they try to use their powers, things will not work well. But then Sid says he is good at breaking things, in case they cannot use magic. Since Sid is so reliable, she says she always wanted to have an elegant knight to protect her, since she is only a beautiful and delicate lady in danger. Sid asks what she will do after being freed. As they walk out of the room, she replies that she will simply vanish into nothing when he closes the door. On the other hand, Alpha and the others are also on their journey through the sanctuary, where they can see the memory of the hero Oliver, who had been confined there. In the memories, they discover that long ago the cult gathered children in a huge place that looked like a rehabilitation center or a hospital. There, they were used for experiments, although some children died, a few survived, and those are known as the possessed. Meanwhile, the heroine Oliver is one of the children who were compatible with the cells of the demon Diablos, which were given to them to ingest. Apparently, the Archbishop was one of the cult members who committed those terrible acts. However, he shows remorse, saying that everything was done so that they could defeat the demon Diablos, although that is only a cult excuse. The fact that Oliver truly severed the demon's arm means it is not just a fairy tale. Meanwhile, the place where they are has changed over time because of the battles that took place there, where memories fade and are replaced by new ones. Oliver ended up receiving the mission to extract new cells of Diablos as soon as she was mature enough. The Archbishop says that is not true, but Alpha continues her explanation. Oliver would have been obedient even after gaining her powers. She believed that if she completed that mission, people could live in peace. But she was wrong. She only ended up creating a battlefield full of dead bodies. And even though the demon looked dead, in reality he was still alive. This demon killed many people, which made the cult use ancient artifacts to immobilize his left arm. They researched him by cutting his flesh and collecting his blood, and that was how they obtained the small red spheres they ingested. However, the side effect of these seeds is extremely strong, which the cult considers a serious problem. Suddenly, he finds himself standing before the demon's hidden arm, inside a massive glass tube filled with fluid, completely chained up. The Archbishop becomes distressed when seeing this, and he shouts at them for revealing the memory that he had ingested the seeds derived from Diablo's blood, which supposedly grant great powers and great forms of immortality. This is exactly what the cult truly desired, and Alpha reveals the princesses that the priest Nelson had been involved with this whole time, which makes her vent about everything she endured in the cult. The seed must be ingested once every year, or its effect fades, and that is why they can only produce a small amount, 12 per year, the same number as the members of the Night of the Knights cult, which are those round knights. Alpha says the seeds still have not been perfected, and that they believe the only way is to immobilize the demon's limb. Then it is revealed that Alpha is actually Oliver's descendant, and she asks the Archbishop to prove otherwise. The priest says the cult needs eternal life and power, and he admits to being one of the Knights of the Round. At that moment, he breaks free from his restraints and Delta stabs him from behind. This ends up being the Archbishop's demise, since she throws him into the water beneath them. Delta apologizes for killing him, because she had been instructed not to do so until obtaining the required information. But to everyone's surprise, the Archbishop did not die. He emerges from the water like a giant and disturbs the memories, which separates the women in the process. They all find themselves in a completely white hall, which Alpha assumes is another feature of the Sanctuary's security system. Meanwhile, the Archbishop and the Knights of the Round are also there, preparing for battle with them. And this is where our video ends. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, leave a like and comment below if you want to see part 2. I'll stop here, stay safe, God bless you, and see you in the next video.